Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to be looking at the Cutlass Black and going over what kinds of vehicles you can fit into it. This is the section of space I'm going to be focusing in on. It's located in the back of the ship and I'm going to be restricting myself to only dealing with this space when it comes to storing vehicles within the Cutlass. There's a good reason for that. It's because it goes hand in hand with what my definition of a comfortable fit is when it comes to storing vehicles or smaller ships within a larger vessel. I consider something to be a comfortable fit only if the vehicle adheres to a specific set of criteria. The first thing is that all the vehicles that you're carrying have to fully fit within the confines of the ship's cargo grid. If you have so much as a tire hanging off the edges, some weird things can start to happen to the vehicle during transit. Usually they start bouncing around uncontrollably, or they'll start sliding out of position until eventually they collide with something else or end up making their way completely off of the grid. I've even had vehicles that weren't fully sitting on the grid rubber band their way out of the ship and eventually fly off into space. This will become an even bigger issue after the sudden shift in momentum that's going to happen when you go into and out of quantum has been introduced into the game. Another criteria that I've set for a vehicle to be considered as a comfortable fit is that once you've parked it, you and your passenger should be able to get out, be able to walk around the vehicle, and be able to get out of the cargo bay by either entering the ship that it's being stored in or to exit out through whatever door or ramp that you've entered the ship through. And this only makes sense because you don't want the driver or the passenger being stuck in the vehicle during transit. And if you're playing solo, it means that you won't be able to get out and fly the ship, which is going to be a huge problem for you. You're also going to want to leave some breathing room between stowed vehicles because they tend to move around a bit even after they've been parked and powered down. All it takes is one slight bump from one vehicle into another to set off a chain reaction that results in a catastrophic disaster. There's another issue that can happen if you park too closely to the walls of the ship's hull. When you exit the vehicle, you can walk right into the wall and get fatally stuck inside of it. This goes for the passengers as well. So giving yourself a little breathing room between the vehicle and any adjacent wall is a good way to keep this from happening. Now that persistence is more of a thing, I've recently added a third addendum to this list, and it's that you have to be able to store the ship with the vehicles in it and be able to spawn them again without there being any issues. This also includes logging out of the game and back into it. I found that if you park vehicles too close to one another so that their bounding boxes are overlapping when you log off or if you store a ship, when you spawn it back into the gaming world, the vehicles are going to be all over the place, and will frequently be clipping the walls of the ship or each other. And the whole reason why I even set up this definition of what I consider to be a comfortable fit is because whenever I make one of these videos, I always get somebody in the comments section bragging that they can get more vehicles in than I did, which is completely missing the point. This isn't a contest, and I'm not trying to see how many vehicles I can pigpile into the smallest amount of space. I'm trying to show how many vehicles you can realistically transport inside of a ship. Because when you're actually playing the game, this will be how you're going to want to do it. You're going to want all your vehicles you're carrying to survive the journey and as damage-free as possible. And once you reach your destination, you're going to want to be able to easily get those vehicles out of the ship. The Cutlass Black's grid can store cargo or vehicles on it, and it's divided up into two separate sections. The larger one is set in between the Cuddy's side doors and can hold a group of boxes that are arranged in a setup that's stacked 2 boxes high by 5 boxes long and 4 boxes wide. The smaller grid is located even further back in the stern of the ship in between 2 sets of jump seats and next to the vehicle ramp. This grid has only enough room to stack boxes in a single row that's 3 boxes long and 2 boxes high. And these 2 grids are not connected to one another, and as you can see they're shaped differently and they take up different amounts of space, which means that you're not going to be able to fit the same number of vehicles onto these grids. One of the best features of the Cutlass Black is that it can carry a Cyclone. You don't have to do anything crazy to get in or out. The only thing you have to do is fold up all the jump seats before you attempt to bring it inside. The large grid can hold a single Cyclone on it, which leaves you with plenty of room for the driver and the passenger to get out and unload any cargo you may have in the back of it, which is really handy if you're driving the standard Cyclone, which can carry a single cargo box. You can also get a second Cyclone in as well if you park it right behind the first one, but there are a couple of issues that goes along with doing this. The first one is that you have to pull up far enough so that the driver and the passenger can get out of the vehicle and into the cargo bay. If you don't, both occupants of the vehicle are going to be pinned in by the Cyclone's oversized tires. The second issue is that parking a Cyclone on the small grid is going to block you off from accessing the ramp, so you're not going to be able to use it or get out of the cuddy while the Cyclone's parked there, which isn't going to be that big of a deal as long as you unload this Cyclone first after you've arrived at your destination. I know some people are going to say that you can always leave via one of the sliding doors, but if you do that, it's going to create a whole new issue for you to have to deal with, which is you're not going to be able to use the ramp to get back into the ship. If you don't have someone else who's on board who can move the Cyclone, then you're kind of screwed. The last thing is that you're not going to be able to utilize the Cuddy's 6 jump seats and park a Cyclone on the small grid at the same time. You're going to have to fold those seats up in order to make enough room for it. This is only going to be an issue if you plan on using the Cutlass as a dropship and you end up really needing those extra seats. Although theoretically, if you're carrying 2 TRs, you could put 6 people in the Cyclones and transport them that way instead. Here's something else that's technically possible, but I wouldn't advise doing it, and it's that you can get 3 Cyclones into the Cutlass. You do this by pulling one in as far to the left side of the large grid as possible and another as far as you can bring it to the right side. This may require a bit of slamming and banging about, and the tires are going to clip into each other rather badly after they finish settling into place. And then you can bring a third one in and park it on the small grid. And there's a lot of issues that goes along with doing this, but it can be technically done. It can also be a bit of a nightmare to get them out again, and there's going to be practically no room left over for you to even get out of the vehicle. I've done this before and transported 3 TRs with varied levels of success, so the risk of something going wrong during transit is rather high, but it is going to be rewarding to be able to use a single Cutlass to bring 3 Cyclones to an LZ. It's fun to try, but once again, it is not a recommended way for you to transport Cyclones. In addition to 2 Cyclones, the Cutlass can handle carrying a variety of Gravlev bikes. Specifically, I'm going to start by going over how many Dragonflies it can transport at one time. This bike was also manufactured by Drake, and it's not surprising that you could park 2 of them on the large grid and they'll fit like a glove. In fact, if you look at the ground that surrounds it, you'll see 2 sets of yellow markers that indicates where you can park them. You can use them as a guide to go by, and if you do it correctly, you'll never have a problem with mounting or dismounting the Dragonflies or with getting them out of the ship. You can park an additional 3rd Dragonfly on the small grid, which would provide ground transportation for a total of 6 people. I had someone argue with me that you should be able to park 3 on the large grid and a 4th in the smaller one. There's not going to be enough room for you to do that. The 3rd Dragonfly is going to have to be parked further back away from the other 2 because of the shape of the room. So no matter how you try to work it out, you're only going to be able to safely transport 3 Dragonflies. And when you're parking them, it's best to even out the space between them and the walls as much as possible. Transporting 3 Dragonflies can be really advantageous if you're using the Cuddy as a dropship, because the Dragonfly that's parked on the small grid won't stop people from sitting in the drop seats. And since the Dragonfly can carry 2 people each, that's going to potentially allow you to carry 6 people in the Dragonflies and an additional 6 more people in the jump seats for a total of 12 people. And that's not even including the crew. In addition to being able to carry 2 people each, the Dragonflies have room to stow a few personal items, and they can handle going over rougher terrain than the Nox can. And this is kind of a big deal since you could potentially carry the same amount of Dragonflies using a Cutlass Black that you could safely carry if you were using a Valkyrie. And because of the way that they're parked, it's a lot easier to get them in and out from the Cutlass than it is from the Val. You can place 2 Noxes in the same spot along the large grid where I initially put the 2 Dragonflies. Noxes are a little bit smaller than the Dragonflies are, so if you spread them out a little bit further apart, you can easily fit 3 of them onto the large grid and still have enough room to get on and off each one of them. Now that made me think. Generally, I found that I can fit 2 Noxes onto any amount of space that can hold 1 Dragonfly. So I continued to test this theory and attempted to get 4 of them onto the large grid. This could be tricky to do because Gravlevs have a tendency to magnetize and stick to a wall if you get too close to them. But if you're careful about it and you take it slow, you can get 4 Noxes onto the grid. It's a little bit of a tighter fit, but you can still move around them. If you take this one step further, you can get an additional 2 more Noxes onto the small grid, which brings up the total number of Noxes that you can carry at once to 6. Once again, this is a very impressive feat on behalf of the Cutlass, since this is the same amount of Noxes that the Valkyrie can comfortably fit inside of its vehicle bay. So what are the advantages to bringing 6 Noxes instead of 3 Dragonflies? They may not have any extra cargo space, but you could compensate for that by outfitting the Nox pilots with armor that has some extra carrying capacity like the rucksack. Another advantage is that this will now double the amount of firepower that you're going to bring to a battle, since every one of the dropship soldiers can now drive their own Gravlev bike. But in the end, I really don't see there being a huge advantage one way or the other if you plan on using all Noxes or all Dragonflies, or even if you decide to bring a mix of the 2. What it really boils down to is tactics and preference, which is going to be determined by how many of each Gravlevs you have access to, how many soldiers you're going to be trying to transport, and what exactly your goal is going to be. With that in mind, you can mix and match what vehicles you plan on bringing with you and come up with a tactic that best facilitates using them. For the sake of completionism, I had to include the Greycat in this list as well. The total number that I could put into the Cuddy at one time was 7, and this includes using both vehicle grids. The good thing about the Greycats is that you can pack them in tire to tire, so you can safely transport more of them than any other vehicle. I'm not entirely sure why you'd want to ever carry this many Greycats around, unless maybe if you were acting as a support vessel for the Daymar rally, but that's the only real reason I could come up with. But you can never tell what the future holds, and it's always good to know that you have options available to you. The very last thing that I want to go over was some failures and misconceptions when it comes to what can fit into the Cutlass. If you were just looking at this space with nothing else to give it context, most people would swear that you should be able to fly a Kruger right in through the side doors. As you can see here, this is not going to happen, and you can't twist or angle it in either. It's just literally too big to fit. You're also not going to be able to fly it in through the rear ramp. The Ursa rover doesn't fit into the Cutlass either. It doesn't matter how much of a running start you get, and if you try anyway, all it's going to do is result in giving your Cutlass one extremely painful colonoscopy. There are a few things that I didn't talk about, like the Rangers and the other gravlevs like the X1, the Velocity, and the Force, but none of them are in the game right now, so there's not really much of a point going over them. But I do look forward to doing a video like this featuring them after they become drivable assets in the game. Well, that's going to be it for this video. I'd like to thank everybody for liking and subscribing because it makes these videos more visible on YouTube and it really helps the channel to grow. I'd also like to give a special thanks to my patrons who make it possible for me to do this. If you'd like to become a patron, you can find a link to my Patreon site in the description of this video. Thanks again for watching, and take care.